Hey guys, what is cracking? It is Krakenation here, your coach of the Boston Bisharps, but also your league, what's the word? Owner, runner of
Commissioner.
Draft Classic
Commissioner.
8. And today, guys, we just finished our draft up. It was wildly successful, absolutely blast, lots of snipes, lots of weird trades going on in the draft. It was a lot of fun. And so we're going to be doing some little bit of draft recap analysis. Not exactly grades. We got a couple of the fellas in call today. You may recognize them. We'll start with, why don't we go ahead and have you guys introduce yourself. We'll start with the boy Daniel.
Well, what's going on? It's Daniel, coach of the Syracuse Sylveons. Back since, it's been a while. I've been in retirement for a while, but I'm back now, ready to claim some lives. And thanks for having me.
That's what we love to hear. And then we also got another fella in the call today. Why don't we go ahead, Sean, Inversify.
Yep. Which are the Air Force Corbinites, the beautiful draft you currently see on your screen.
That is correct.
Absolutely wonderful. And I'm here to roast everyone else's drafts.
All right, so we're gonna be doing like I was saying earlier, as we're just gonna go through. This probably end up being a pretty long video. We're gonna go through, do some quick, just a recap of these drafts, how they turned out, what we think, strengths, weaknesses, a little bit of review, and maybe some predictions will work their way in there. It's a world of possibilities. Who knows?
So it's okay that it's going to be a long video because we know that Akeem will definitely put timestamps in the description.
Akeem might not, but someone might. I wonder who that could be. So let's get right ahead. Starting here with Air Force Corbinites. So right off the bat, we'll start off with Sean's draft. I'll actually no. Let's have Sean start us off since it's his draft. He can let us know how he's feeling.
All right, feeling very good. Definitely, I had the 5th pick, and all the really high stuff that I wanted was gone. So I went for Torn because I figured I wanted to go for some more regen, bulkier style draft, I guess. And then everything in my dreams turned out to be true. Well, except for a few things, but mostly everything.
Yeah, it didn't seem like you had a whole lot of crucial snipes.
Yeah, I mean, I got the first 3 that I wanted. That was kind of the big deal. Kind of wanted to get a Crocodile 4th, but I realized I was maybe pushing my luck a little bit. But overall, I'm really happy with the team I got. A little on the fatter side, but, it'll be a little change of pace because I usually like to build my drafts more offensive, but, I'll have fun with it.
It's definitely on the fatter side. You got a lot of, obviously we have that regen core term of Clef and Sloping, but you also have other, and then also Aloe, but you also got some pretty bulky mons in general.
Indeed.
So Shaman, Steelix, like I said, yeah, Torn's a regen mon, so it can run a little bulkier spreads pretty easily. Glaceon even is, I don't know if you'll ever bring it, to be honest, because it's kind of a trash mon.
I mean,
but
I drafted Glaceon because I was like, my draft kind of folds to freeze dry. Let me just rectify that real quick.
So there's our freeze dry answer choice. Dan, what are you thinking of this draft?
Yeah, I think it's a really good approach to start with a core that you really want and then just let the draft kind of build itself from there. A lot of people focus on maybe one Pokemon, but if you can take it one step further, focus on one core, plenty of different things can work off of a pivoting regeneration core. So it's definitely a really good tactic, I would say, and something that other coaches can definitely learn from.
And this is definitely a really pivot heavy draft. I'd say maybe one of, if not the most pivot heavy drafts in the league this season. Not only because it makes use of regen, but also almost all the top mons have pivot access of some kind. So a lot of the ones.
I don't know what the hell you're talking about, dude.
What do you mean?
Shaman, Alomomola.
Well, Alomomola, I consider with Regenerator. I still consider it fundamentally a pivot, right?
I mean, kind of.
It still functions within that role as a defensive pivot.
Also, Teleport Clefable, kind of pretty trash. So.
No, I just feel you have a lot of
I would say when I was making it, I wasn't really focused on pivoting moves as much as I was focusing on, you have the bulk to be able to switch in. Hard anyway.
But
or in the case of Obstagoon and stuff, if you have a wish up, you can probably switch in and not get O-code and then get most of your health back.
Yeah, no, I see that. I'm just saying you kind of you can But even there, what you're saying now is like a lot of switching, which is part of the game plan with this team, obviously, when you have regen.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
But which is kind of what I'm getting at, like a lot of pivoting, a lot of switching, and a lot of the mons that benefit the most off of it are actually your lower tier mons, I would say, in the sense like you brought up like Obstagoon, which isn't exactly low tier, but it was like one of your later picks. So you kind of got like your pivoting and regen cores out of the way early, like Dan was saying, and then kind of took mons that would benefit off of it later.
Definitely, for sure. Like Stunfisk and Mega Steelix obviously love the Wish support because they're fat boys that kind of just get worn down over time, but we're bringing the Alomomola or the Clefable with Wish, even the Glaceon, because literally I love Wish. I even got Healing Wish on a couple mons.
Now,
I think Alec gets it.
Now, as far as weaknesses go of this draft, I guess you looking at like the typing chart, I guess kind of have a ground weakness overall, but I don't even feel like you really do because a lot of it's compounded by just like some of your lower tier mons share that ground weakness, but not really in your upper tier as much, which feels like on an average week the team you're bringing is not going to actually be ground weak. It just happens to be that like a couple extra of your low tiers are ground weak, and so it looks like you're ground weak. But the one thing I wanted to say about this draft is that you are missing several types that I think most people consider quite important on average. Like I think like fighting type, dragon type, ghost type are all types that usually people seek out a lot, especially fighting type of those. I feel like there's a lot of bulky normals out there that you might I feel like struggle to break through, and basically comes down to like Obstagoon like being a really powerful physical breaker to get through some of those bulky normals because the rest of the team is basically special attackers.
I think my kind of view there. So I'm missing a lot of the types, but a lot of my Pokemon cover those types very well. Like you're talking about like fighting type, like Superpower Torn. I believe Slowking gets Focus Blast, but maybe not. I know like definitely like fire type, like Torn gets fire coverage, Clef gets fire coverage, Slowking gets fire coverage, Obstagoon gets fire coverage, Mega Steelix gets fire coverage.
Yeah.
And then even like fighting, like Rock Dusk has Tough Claws, close combat. Obstagoon has close combat and is generally a really good wall breaker. Mega Steelix does very well into a lot of normals because it can just kind of sit there, especially with Wish support. Yeah. So, yeah, and like what you're saying with the ground weakness, it's not even always like having a resist too. Like a lot of like ground types, Alomomola can just check because it has great bulk. You can threaten them with Scalds and the like.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
No, I agree. Dan, any last thoughts on this draft before we move on?
No, I don't think anything is left to say. Very, very powerful draft. I'm very
though,
scared.
I guess my one other concern about this, like the speed tiers aren't great. Like after Obstagoon, it really just falls off a cliff.
Yeah, that's true. Big gap there. That's a really good point. You can see that on the
Yeah, and it's like not the fastest draft ever, but I think it's fast enough on the top end with 121. It's fast enough to, you're not going to be getting those like super speed, like Deoxys speed or like Mega Beedrill, Mega Alakazam stuff. But I think I still have the bulk to deal with those mons.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of counting on like, the fact that Shaman isn't really going to run max speed every week, so I can kind of, maybe not run max speed, but run some speed, and people might not be able to be like, oh, my 80 speed mon, I don't have to run anything against this team. But, well, maybe you want to be creeping like min speed Shaman or like some kind of speed on Shaman. So that's what I'm hoping at least. But
I kind of, and that's a good argument to make, especially because Shaman is like such a flexible mon as far as the way you invest its EVs. That's a very fair point. All right, we do gotta start moving on because that was our first mon. Team just took like 5 minutes. So it's gonna be more than that. So we're gonna move on to, I guess I'm next up. Your boy, the Boston Bisharps. Akeem's draft sucks. Did someone? What is happening?
Yeah, I gave you a little friendly note there.
Oh my gosh, he even got the oh gosh. All right, well fine, so be it. So right off the bat, I guess I'll start off with talking about my draft. For the most part, quite pleased with how it turned out. I definitely had a couple pretty brutal snipes in the middle of the draft that I was like really not counting on. Like I got really close to the mon I wanted, and then just at the last kind of like a few picks before it kept going. someone in this call may have actually done said activity against you.
Yeah, you're welcome, dude.
But so definitely like I really loved how my draft started, and my first few picks are some mons I've wanted to use for a long time, especially Cinderace is a mon I've wanted to draft for like 4 straight seasons, so I was really excited to be able to pick that up. But the Registeel pick was not my favorite in the world. I've been led to believe that it is better than certain Pokemon that rhyme with Bega Dagron. but
It's true.
but I overall I really liked that. Like my goal was like I picked up Garchomp early, surprise surprise, and then I just wanted to see like how can I support Garchomp as well as possible. Tried to build like I thought that was the goal behind something like Slowbro and Registeel was like really like support its weaknesses very effectively. Give it chances to come in for free. Give it some slow pivots later in the draft to bring in Garchomp for free, as well as Cinderace and Gengar. Which again, I was trying to like what are mons that can support what Garchomp's trying to do and kind of like offset. So I got a special breaker for it. I got some speed, some hazard game control. I really was kind of struggling with the last like 4 or 5 spots in the draft. I thought about Mega Audino long and hard in this draft, as Sean knows. I'm overall pretty pleased with how it turned out. I feel like I covered my typings pretty well. Biggest weaknesses that I felt of my draft, I felt a little ground weak overall. Unlike Sean, my ground weakness is actually kind of compounded by most of my high tiers being the ones that are weak to ground. It's kind of the opposite problem, or opposite where that actually becomes a problem because I have like Gengar and Cinderace and Registeel, and then even DNC a little bit. Like I've got some compounded ground weaknesses, so it's going to be a lot of pressure on Slowbro and Rotom-Mow to kind of handle those. But overall, that was the big weakness that I kind of felt coming in. I guess I don't have that super top end speed tier either. 119 with Cinderace is kind of where I'm topping out, so I share that problem with Sean. And then lack of reliable priority. Like the best priority on this team is unironically probably Quick Attack Zangoose, which is not great priority. So we're a little bit of a less than ideal situation there. But overall, I think I have a lot of really good typing synergy, a lot of good roll synergy, some good pivots. I think I'm built a draft to support my top few mons pretty well. But I'll give the floor to these guys.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, yeah, I think this might be one of the few drafts we see that's only missing one Pokemon typing. It's not easy to end up with one of every type and still have be mindful of your weak resist chart. So I don't think. I mean, you're mentioning ground weaknesses, so maybe without having like a strong ice type would help you threaten those types of ground types, especially since a lot of ice types have Ice Shard and would solve one of your priority issues. But I think you touched on pretty much everything I was going to say, talking about ground weaknesses, talking about your speed ladder looking pretty good. I don't see any overwhelming issues.
Yeah, and to kind of like the ice type point, I just felt like I always have said like I don't think ice type is a very good type to be. I think it's a better type to have in your coverage pocket, like coverage pool. But like, yeah, there are some good ice types, but overall, ice type is just such a detriment defensively. Unless you're Weavile and you're like really ridiculously fast and clicking knockoff, which is what actually Weavile is like better at. Like, I don't think like ice type is a valuable type to be. I think it's more of a valuable type to like have moves for. And same thing with like a couple other types, but I just ended up having all the other types. Like I don't think bug type is that important either, but I ended up with a bug type, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, like I did make a point to try to have some diversity there. I don't know. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of share your guys' opinions for the most part. I think, like, if I were an opposing coach breaking down this draft, what I see is there's not a ton of reliable recovery. I mean, we have Slowbro, which is really fucking annoying to deal with and is a key part of this draft. But outside of that, there's a lot of mons that can get worn down very easily, and combined with the somewhat low top-end speed tier and the priority, I think definitely the weakness of this draft would maybe be like things get chipped and then something sets up and sweeps because you don't have the priority or the health to deal with it.
Yeah, it's very fair.
So I think that's kind of the big problem. But other than that, I think like as you guys were saying, I think even the ground weakness is really not a big deal because of Slowbro. it's kind of like what I was saying last draft with the Lomomola. Like maybe it doesn't resist ground, but it pretty much resists ground, at least like earthquakes for most things. So I think like the type weakness is all there, and you have a couple intimidate users on the back end too for maybe some physical threats. But that's just my one concern with your team, Akeem, is just kind of like things get chipped down and then something sets up and you just can't outspeed it and it just cleans your team.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's absolutely a fair point. I think, I mean, maybe I should have gone Mega Adino in that case, but no, I definitely see
Hey,
where
who
you're
knows?
coming from, and I'm gonna have to play a lot of more offensive styles. I think for that reason, um,
For
to
sure.
not like give people opportunities to like chip down or set up on me, because I'm the one on the front foot more often. But you're right, because there is
Right.
literally like what one reliable recovery move. Masquerade might get roost, but like there's one
Right.
reliable
Yeah, we're not
recovery.
counting that.
Like there's one Pokemon that has reliable recovery on this team. So yeah. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep moving through here. We got the Buffalo Salamence, coached by Pickle Nugget, coming up next. Overall, I think this is actually, I keep starting, so why don't we have Dan? Have you start this time. Take turns here.
For sure. Well, we can see just from the bars down the bottom left that looks like there's not a whole lot of hazard clearing or hazard setting. Uh, hazard setting doesn't seem right. I mean, Terrakion gets rocks, Pillow gets
Yeah,
rocks.
maybe
I thought
something
Type
up with
Null
that.
got rocks.
Type Null does
I'm
It
not.
not
does
sure what's
not.
going on
Those
there.
those
Oh,
are the
okay.
only two rockers, and he has no other hazards. So that's
Okay,
fine.
well, there you go. So I think that's less of a problem in this generation because if you are trying to play the hazard game, you're just going to have someone bring a bunch of heavy boots and like man up with their work boots. So I'm not sure if the hazard setting problem is going to be much of an issue. And then similarly, he might not have a lot of hazard clearing, but he can do that himself. He can put on heavy duty boots if he needs to. But definitely crazy speed control with Mega Alakazam, a very threatening mon, as we all know, even with Nasty Plot removed. And I actually stand corrected. Akeem was only missing one type, and now we got Pickle Nugget only missing one type as well. Although I think it's safe to say that dragons tend to be valued more highly than ice types, but
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know if that's necessarily exploitable.
I think a lot of players just it's honestly if myself included, like if you're unsure of a direction to go, just trying to round out your types in general is like a safe approach to drafting. Where like if you're not sure what you're going for next, just trying to be like, okay, let me get more different types. Like let me not is a safe-ish way to direction to go. Um, I definitely think this is a pretty solid draft overall. Definitely has some very threatening top end offense, is what really screams me. Like, this is like a pretty hyper offense draft. It's really going for it. The power on the top between Zam and Terrakion is obviously really immense. Aegislash obviously is not what it once was, but still a really good mon. And the Volcanion, I think I actually learned this from Sean like several generations ago or something. The Volcanion is one of those cool mons that is one of the only mons that can use all three choice items pretty viably, which is pretty neat.
True.
It's obviously also a mon that benefits from boots, and then I think Moltres Galar at 8 points is kind of a steal. He's got that Bulu also, which you kind of like forget because it's later in the draft, but just a ton of top end offense here. He's got some low tier value in Type Null. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think Illumise is a bringable Pokemon.
Yeah, this just looks like a 9-mon draft.
I think it gets like, I know it has Prankster. I think it gets Thunder Wave or like some speed control, and I know it gets U-turn. So I think that's kind of the thought process there. Is like
Help
maybe
out
I can
Zam,
use it
maybe,
if
or
like
Track.
Prankster Thunder Wave. I know it gets Prankster Encore, so it's just kind of an annoying mon for
Okay.
like maybe something that's setting up, especially because like obviously we have Mega Alakazam is very fast, but outside of that the speed's a little bit lacking.
That's what I was
I
going to
don't
talk
love.
about.
Yeah, I don't love like the Volcanion, Bulu, Toxtricity, all like right there in the same speed tier, all kind of have almost the same role, although they definitely do it in different ways, obviously being like
Offensive
physical
breakers
versus
of some
special.
kind.
Right. Offensive slow breakers that don't have the greatest bulk and definitely can be abused. Um,
Also, like
so
some shared
that's kind of what
weaknesses
I
between
don't.
them, all like for what it's worth. Like definitely another like
Yeah,
I don't know. Just,
he definitely is going to be relying a lot on the grassy terrain from Bulu, weaken
yeah,
some
for
grass
sure,
moves.
for sure. And I
But
think
yeah,
those speed
this isn't my
tiers.
personal favorite draft just because I am not a fan of some of these Pokemon. Like I think Bulu is not that great. I think Terrakion's kind of eh. Although for 16 it's not terrible. And I've never been a big Aegislash fan, so not my personal favorite draft, but I see what he was going for, and I can definitely see how I like the plan of bringing in a bunch of these breakers and then trying to get Mega Alakazam set up for a sweep because he definitely has a lot of ways to deal with the things that Mega Alakazam doesn't like. Like obviously Terrakion, great against
Steals,
steals and
darks.
darks,
Yeah,
and like
absolutely.
Volcanion can hit some stuff.
Yeah, I think he
Right.
supported Zan pretty well, but I think the one big weakness of the draft, if I can just say last thought, just like Sean was kind of touching on that I meant to talk about more, was the speed tiers are like pretty bad. Because 150, Alakazam obviously is really fast, so he has like a really nice top end speed. I'm not trying to say that doesn't exist, but people aren't usually prepping for Alakazam speed tier that often because most people can't even touch that speed tier on an average team, right? So like yeah, maybe people will go for like, oh, this is how fast modest Alakazam is, but usually Alakazam is dictating the top of the speed, and then after that, like Terrakion's a really big gap, and then you just have this big clump of Mons right around 70, 75, that are all pretty high tiers. So you're counting on them on your average matchups. You know, it's not like those are low tier 70s. Those are like some of these like Bulu and Aegislash and like Volcanion. So you have this kind of clump of Mons that you need to bring every week that are all bunched right up together, which can be a little bit of an issue sometimes. But let's keep moving forward here. We'll go to the Castelia Shifus, coached by Destiny. And Sean, why don't we have you start this one?
All right. So right away, I kind of clowned him for this round 3 Blastoise, and then like of course there's this bulky water run. So I mean, hey, if he wants to grab his choice of bulky water, it's great. But I think this is it's a very interesting draft. I think it's got a lot of mons that you don't always see picked up, but I like. So like Blacephalon, I think is actually quite good now with the addition of boots, and I think just being an offensive ghost type that's high tier is very
Yeah,
valuable because ghost type,
always,
especially
always.
with that secondary stab to be able to hit some things. Um, like obviously he has Zarude, but like say Zarude was your dark, you know, I have the fire stab to hit you now. So I think it's kind of tough because you know between Megalopony and Blacephalon is only Swoobat, which is like I don't know how much you're really prepping for that. Maybe you're bringing your dark type for this, but
But you're bringing your
yeah,
dark type against this team. I feel like a lot, anyways. Like
yeah, no, I understand, but like I'm saying, like you're not really prepping for the Swoobat speed tier maybe as much. And then kind of the other thing that I was seeing is like if you have a strong rock type, um, you're probably feeling pretty good against this draft because the only rock resist is Megalopony. Obviously, it has to be Megad first, and it's not a great switch into most things anyway. So he's got a lot of things that would be rock resist that are just neutral to it. But it really
his
depends
feel, his
because he
ground.
does have the bulk on some Pokemon. Like Gliscor can handle a lot of rock types. Blastoise can handle a lot of rock types
Reggie
at least
Rock.
once.
Reggie
Yeah,
Rock
Reggie
too.
Rock can handle a lot of rock types. So this is another team where it's like, you know, there's like basically 2 good Mons with viable recovery in Gliscor, and like Zarude has synthesis at least, and can be used kind of defensively. But other than that, like, you know, it might be a little bit variable to getting chipped down, and you know, there's not great priority on this draft either. There's like Megalopony has some priority, but that's already like that's the top of your speed tier already.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's kind of the weakness a little bit with this team. Although I do think, just like with your team, Akeem, like this team has some decent scarfers in like Blacephalon, Zarude, that are able to maybe mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think about this draft?
Yeah, sort of in a similar vein, talking about Megalopony being the only rock resist. having only one dragon resist and one flying resist, when those tend to be like very spammable moves. I mean, people talk about bird spam. Dragons are pretty common type to be picking up, so relying on Escavalier to deal with dragons, and I mean, Regirock is definitely pretty fat. He can probably deal with the bird spam, but I always just get nervous when someone only has one resist when on a spammable type like that. That tends to be where I start when I'm prepping for a matchup, is to look at
man.
where their one resist comes from.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. That's I want to branch off exactly that topic because to your point, like we talk about him having only one flying resist and only one dragon resist, and the reason is because talking about I keep coming back to types that I think are pretty important to try to be picking up if possible, and I think he's missing two pretty important types. I would argue. I think having a good fairy is pretty helpful because dragon is such a spammable type. Fairy is such a good defensive type because a lot of fairies can come in on things like knockoffs on powerful dragons. The big ones are knockoff, also powerful fighting moves, especially when you have a couple Pokemon here like Lopunny that might want to not have to take mock punches. I guess he has like a Mesprit, Blacephalon, thing like that, but just Electric and Fairy are two pretty strong types, and I just think those are things you want to be careful of. Those are useful types to be drafting on average. I think, like, for example, this team is pretty knock weak for the most part. Like, if obviously Gliscor, if it's already Toxic Orb, doesn't mind, but after that, I don't think this team has a lot of terrific knockoff switch-ins. Zarude is okay, but I'm like not a big Zarude truther, so I might just be mistaken. I don't know. Overall, definitely some threatening mons, I would say. Not my favorite draft. I like the Gliscor, and then the Blastoise pickup was really early, but I do like Blastoise to support these top mons, so I kind of understand it. He has a lot of low tier mons that are like I've always love. Like I love Mesprit, I love Escavalier, I love Dragalge. So I love these lower tier pickups. So he wins my heart there. But just again, also this is a draft that like Sean, kind of to your point earlier about my draft, like only has one mon with reliable recovery again. And to be fair, that mon has very reliable recovery again, just like me. But it's the exact same problem,
Zarude has Synthesis.
Oh, so. I forgot about Zarude. Sorry about that. My bad.
But yeah, still two.
But yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty good draft. Just a couple typing holes, and it sounds like we're worried about some types being able to come in and exploit that a little bit.
Right.
All right, let's keep moving here. Sean, did you have any last thoughts? Sounded like?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I'm trying to think of a dragon that like doesn't have fire coverage that to like hit Escavalier.
No, that's
really hard to think of one.
Absolutely, I think like a good dragon type could be a really big problem for this draft in general.
Right.
Just things to be careful of. All right, moving on to Chicago Bewares. Our boy, we've all been friends with this guy for a long time, Noah. I guess I can start off this time. So he's got a top tier core that looks a little familiar to me, only because I tend to do Mega Scissor plus a Dragon Ground, certain different Dragon Ground pretty regularly.
A better Dragon Ground.
But still a pretty cool core there. Zygarde obviously does a few things differently than Garchomp. I think it's a little more of a kind of like defensive threat in some regards, but all like with coil sets and whatnot, but also has a little bit of sweeping potential. Overall, I'd say Garchomp is a little better, but Zygarde's still a really cool Pokemon. Mega Scissor, really a great mon. And I think Rotom Heat is an awesome partner for this core. Like, I think his top three was just terrific, I think, synergy-wise. Because Rotom Heat, obviously, first of all, resists fire types for Scissor and ice types for Zygarde, but also just is a pivot to bring those mons in when they want, pivot core with Scissor, all that good stuff. I didn't love some of the low-tier pickups. I understand like he picked up double water because they're two very different waters, but I'm just not a big, and I think Sean, I think you like Keldeo a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big Keldeo fan, especially in draft. I just feel like it doesn't do enough different things to be that good. I just kind of didn't love that pickup when he kind of already like round 5 Quagsire was whack enough on its own. I thought
right.
So. I don't know. I would have rather maybe have seen just like one pretty decent water and then be able to have that last spot for maybe a couple of pretty important missing types. Especially, I think it's shocking to me when a lot of times, at least when I'm drafting, I'm like, oh, there's 3 different psychic types and I kind of want all of them and they're all pretty different. he has 0 psychic types, and that's a pretty useful type to have on an average draft because a lot of psychic types are like some of the most versatile Pokemon out there, you know. So just kind of a pretty key missing type there. Could have maybe changed that up a little bit, but some pretty good speed tiers here. A little slow actually. Now I'm looking at it, he like has good staggering, but really slow top end with Serperior, which is a mon that doesn't have any coverage, so people kind of can abuse with certain if they just have certain matchup problems against it. Like it's kind of a mon that's unbringable, very good or unbringable based on matchup sometimes. So I don't know. Couple problems there, I guess, but other than that, I think he's got a really great top 3 that's synergized well that'll take him far. Sean, what do you think?
So, for one, I hate Zygarde. I think it's really overrated and not good. So,
Damn.
Yeah,
Damn,
so
bro.
I already don't obviously love this draft for that reason, but I can understand why people use it. And with Mega Scizor, obviously it has good type synergy that way, but they both don't love bulky waters. And Rotom Heat, while it does synergize fairly well, obviously it doesn't want to switch into water moves.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
in being a Keldeo truther myself, I will say I think it's really good in the specific draft just to run like sub Calm Mindsets, because otherwise, like that set can really take advantage of some of these bulky waters that might want to run like, oh, I want to run a recovery move, I want to run Toxic for Quagsire and Zygarde, I want to run Ice Beam obviously because you always want to run Ice Beam on those bulky waters for Zygarde, and it's also going to hit Superior, which is the other thing that's really going to break you out. And sub Keldeo can really take advantage of some of those, or at least make them think twice before like, oh, I'm just going to bring Scald, Ice Beam, Toxic, Recover, and just sit here and be really fucking annoying. And obviously Superior can switch in a couple times because usually the Ice Beams aren't that strong, but it doesn't love taking them, or it doesn't love taking a Toxic either. And like you're kind of saying, like Superior is not the mon that's like, oh, I'm just going to bring this to every matchup because, it just always does the same thing. So I do like some of these like lower tier pickups. Like I think Miltank is very good. I think Granbull is like excellent for 4 points. Although I'm not a huge fan of Archeops. But I do kind of agree with you on the speed tier there. There's not even like that many great Scarfers. Like Keldeo's decent Scarf, but then you're kind of taking it away from what I was saying, like kind of how I feel.
It goes from beating bulky
Like,
waters to
basically
kind
what
of
its
losing
role
the
is
bulky
on the
waters.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't love dealing with bulky waters if it's running Scarf. And like Superior is okay in some matchups with Scarf Leaf Storm, but it's not great. And I just don't think this draft is quite bulky enough to be able to be losing the speed tier battle that consistently. So that's kind of my concerns with it.
Yeah, Dan, you go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. I think Keldeo brings like some much needed versatility. Everyone knows about the special threat of Keldeo, but his physical sets are actually not bad. His coverage is pretty good. And if you look at other members of this draft, I feel like generally speaking, like what's coming. You know how to prep for a Scizor. You know what you need to do to prep for a Superior and that sort of thing. But when you look at Keldeo, you don't always know what it's going to do. And I think also to Sean's point, having Keldeo be one of the few Scarfers might be an issue in that way, because I think Keldeo is going to have a lot of stress on it to find the perfect set and be unpredictable and variable. So if it's being forced into a choice Scarf role week after week, that might be kind of tough to deal with.
That's it's funny that you guys are both like talking about Keldeo's versatility, because I usually haven't thought of Keldeo as that versatile. I always kind of thought of it as a one-trick pony, but if you will. But
Yeah,
True.
I mean it's got a couple different sets.
I guess
like,
Flip Turn also really changed the game for it.
Yeah, the Flip Turn definitely helps with some of the choice sets like Specs or Scarf. And like the physical is like not great, but I think it did get a couple more coverage moves this gen. I know it got Air Slash, so that helps deal with like grass poisons, which were otherwise really hard because all I had was like Icy Wind. This Air Slash is a little more powerful and has that 30% chance to flinch, which can be really annoying. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's keep going here. We're like 5 drafts in, so we're gonna keep going to the Koira Capricorns. Let's have Sean. Why don't you start us off here?
why is this Sharpedo like not the Mega Sprite?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I'll have to fix that.
Anyways, yeah, if we're talking about like bad speed tiers, the last one, like this one is just terrible. This is probably the worst speed tiers we're going to see because his fast Pokemon are Excelgor, which is a support mon that yes you can bring
Nobody's
spec.
prepping for Excelgor speed tier.
So, yeah, and it's just not. It's not really doing enough with that speed tier. Like if you say, "Oh, I need to revenge kill this thing," like which Pokemon are you turning to? Are we turning to Ace 100 speed Volcarona, which is more of a sweeping threat than anything? Are we turning to Mega Sharpedo, which needs to probably protect turn 1? And then if you want to Mega Evolve, you're not going to be able to use it as a cleaner later. Or basically, we have Scarf Lele, which seems like you're going to have to run like every single week. And if you're running Scarf Lele every single week, it's kind of bad for that price point because it really doesn't hit that hard. And it's still like kind of the thing with Lele is it has enough coverage and the psychic moves hit so hard that it can kind of get it's hard to wall if you're able to switch around, like oh, I clicked psychic and I'm gonna 2-hit KO this whatever Pokemon, but oh no, I'm scarfed now, and they know that I'm scarfed, so they just go into their dark type, and even though I'm a fairy, like, oh, I'm locked into psychic and now I gotta switch out.
Yeah.
So I think it's not the greatest in that regard. And then just kind of like in general, I just feel like this draft lacks some offense. Like outside of Lele, what's really packing a hard punch like off the gate? Like Braviary's a setup sweeper. He's got a bunch of defensive Pokemon. Volcarona hits hard, but it's more of a setup sweeper. Sharpedo again, like if you want to Mega Evolve, you're not going to be able to use it as a cleaner later with the speed boost. It can be fine at 105, but that's not really why you're drafting it. You're kind of drafting it, get that speed boost and then clean up late game. So that's kind of my issues with the draft. It's like, maybe like Bronzong, Rotomosh are just going to get worn down. You have a couple defensive options with recovery, but I just don't think this draft has the power outside of Lele to really deal with some Pokemon. And it's just pretty passive overall, I think.
Dan, you want to go?
Yeah, I think stemming from the idea of Tapu Lele switching out of dark types, I think dark types is actually going to be a pretty big problem for this draft, especially with how many of these Pokemon really need their item, right? Like Gligar needs his Eviolite, Rotom-Wash wants leftovers, Bronzong probably wants leftovers, so your dark resist
come into knockoffs anyways.
Yeah, and your dark resist is Mega Sharpedo, which has a defense of like 2, so that's not a dark resist. You effectively don't have a dark resist, so that's going to be really tough. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really, really good point that I hadn't first seen. Like, I think, first of all, you can see right off the bat that this draft does actually have a net dark weakness, which, if we compound the fact that, in general, I see what you're saying, Sean, about, like, Lele, if you're drafting a mon to only hold Scarf, you're overpaying at that point. I think Scarf is probably its most common set, though, arguably,
I'll agree. I just think that...
But you don't want it to be bottlenecked into that role every single match.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Because it does other things well also, I agree. And to that exact point, if I know, like, I just have to bring in my, like, a Pokemon to take a... Like, I just have to read a Psychic one time correctly, and this team's, like, massively on the back foot for the rest of the match.
Or run Protect.
Or just run Protect, yeah, exactly. Like, it's just see what he locks into and then play around it based on that. That's just going to put this team in a really bad spot on playing the back foot. I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really good point. I was just going to kind of talk about more about the speed tiers in general, to Sean's point, which is just that, and he kind of took it one step further with the in-depth analysis of what that meant. Just that, like, there's a... Excelgor is not, again, one of these mons that, yeah, it's fast, but you're not prepping for its speed tier, because first of all, it's a utility mon more than anything. Even when you do run the occasional, like, offensive Life Orb or Spec set, it's usually so fast that people aren't, like, prepping for that set a ton anyways. And Mega Sharpedo, in the same vein, assuming it's doing its all, like Protect as regular and then Mega Evolve thing, again, people aren't going to be running speed to beat it. They're going to run either Priority or a wall they think can handle you. So it's a tricky situation there. So then it comes down to, okay, so Volcarona is our like revenge killer, and it just, yeah, that's a tough spot because then he also has this huge gap from Braviary to Bronzong. And I guess Gligar never runs speed, but Gligar's not really an offensive powerhouse anyways, and Braviary is a pretty good mon to be fair, but just this gigantic gap where like if he's got like if your opponent has any like base 70, 75, which are 65, which are all pretty common speed tier for a lot of slower wall breakers, those mons can easily now just run Adamant, Modest, and just hit really, really hard on a draft that we just talked about. Also doesn't have a lot of recovery. Um, so could be a little bit of a pickle to be in there, but
I mean, it has some recovery. It's just not everything has recovery. So like, if half your walls don't have recovery, and then you also have no immediate power outside of Lele on this draft. So if you can't break something with Lele, like I think that's the biggest I have with Lele needing to run Scarf is that Lele is literally the only Pokemon that can come in and actually like deal damage right away. Volcarona's
yeah,
gonna need to set
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Braviary, you can run Choice Band, but people are gonna see that based on you taking rocks damage most likely, and then they can play for it accordingly. And Braviary, its bread and butter is definitely still
And,
setup
and and you
sweeping.
know what's interesting to your point is like we're missing a lot of types that are types that usually offer some immediate power. Honestly, like we look at like offensive ghost types, fighting types, like powerful rock types, clicking stone edge, things like that. Like we're missing some types here again. Um, Again, it's a 10-person draft with 20 or 10 mon draft with 20 people, so it's hard. But dragon types clicking like powerful like Dracos and outrage and stuff like that. Let's keep going here. We got to keep this pace up. So the gutsy Golbat, coached by 8Z, best picture you'll ever see in your life. This is an interesting, very eclectic draft to me. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what to make of this particular one. A lot of weird mons. A lot of mons that I know our boy in the call here, Sean, is just amped that Thwacky got drafted. Um,
Dude, Aki is dope.
I
But
think
yeah,
this draft is just a very odd one. I don't know. Obviously, hazard setting out the like just out of control. All of the hazards. I guess not technically webs, but still lots of hazards. Multiple like they got spikes, T spikes, rocks, T spikes again. like, um, just obviously Deoxys Speed I think is kind of an underrated mon, and I personally believe it. I know it's not the most powerful attacker, but I think you can usually just run. It's like more bulky than expected because you can also run so much HP because you're so fast. You barely need speed investment. You can run like nasty plots and it becomes a pretty threatening sweeper. I know we got a big Infernape fan in this call here today. And Infernape is another really good draft format Pokemon. Just I don't know, a lot of mons that I'm not quite sure how they fit together. I thought it was funny that he drafted Dracovish and then drafted a water absorber, so it's like nobody can have this water absorber, so you can like enjoy. I don't know. I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on it for sure. Dan, what do you think?
That was immediately what I saw too. The Dracovish Seismitoad. He just like took a water absorb user off the board, so no one else can have it. But similar to what you're saying, that's if you can even count that as synergy, which I guess maybe it's synergy, but that's one of the few synergistic things I'm even really seeing. I can't even. It's hard for me to tell what I'm even looking at, honestly. But definitely going to have no issue winning the speed game because they've got Deoxys Speed and Mega Manectric, and then Nihilego, which I think typically wants to boost its speed. So definitely a lot of speed control. Doesn't have a dark type, which means no ghost resist, no normal type either. So um, a lot of ghost types like to spam Shadow Ball. I'm not really seeing what's going to be switching
Taking it.
into a Shadow Ball on this team, but
Yeah, for sure.
right. I'll kind of go here because obviously 8Z is a friend of mine, so I helped him out with the draft a lot, and yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. I think kind of the main weakness that stuck out to me was not even like the grass or the ground weakness, honestly. Um, but just the fact that he has a lot of Pokemon that hate one type or one kind of Pokemon, and So I think he's going. This is like more than any other team in the league going to be very, very matchup dependent. So I think if you have a water absorber, Dracovish is going to be really sad and probably almost not bringable. But if you don't, Dracovish is probably going to claim some lives. If you have a really good steel type, Comfy is going to be sad. It's going to be basically have to just U-turn out every time. But if you don't have a good steel type, or your steel type gets worn down or something, Comfy can obviously do incredible things. Mega Manetric, if you have a good ground type, oh well, Mega Manetric really doesn't do much.
It's an
But
interesting way to look at it.
if you get rid of the ground type, Mega Manetric's actually worth way more than 6 points at that point because it's so fast. Obviously, intimidates pretty nice. It has Volt Switch just to wear you down. Obviously, all the things that fast electrics do. So I think that's kind of the main thing here. And then, yeah, obviously, there's no real ghost type switch in. He's kind of relying a lot on grassy terrain from Thwacky as like his ground, because his ground resist for his last two picks was Sigilif and Thwacky.
Yeah.
So it's not great on something, Infernape. Hillego obviously hates grounds as well. Mega Manetric hates grounds. So it's already a draft that doesn't love grounds, even though, maybe Dracovish loves coming in on grounds and then at least slow, bulky ones like, I don't know, Hippowdon or something. But, yeah, I think basically the idea behind the Seismitoad pick was that both Infernape and Dracovish don't really love bulky waters, and Seismitoad kind of beats bulky waters with water absorb, and it has grass coverage on both sides. That was like kind of the thought process. Also, it's just another good rocker, and in my opinion, a very good mon anyway. But yeah, it definitely went off the rails a little bit here. It's a very interesting draft. I think if these Pokemon have a good matchup against you, you might struggle a little bit, but if your team can handle all of the
Checks off some basic boxes, basically.
Yeah,
Like good
if it can
steel
handle
type.
all the kind of tricks, like
Gimmicks,
I don't want to say it's
basically.
like a gimmicky draft, but it kind of is a gimmicky draft a little bit.
It's.
If your team can handle the gimmicks, I think you're gonna have a pretty easy time.
I was
with this
thinking of the
draft.
same thing, which is why I was kind of saying weird. It's like it's not gimmicky as like the team's concept isn't gimmicky. It's just got mons that are kind of like run gimmicks, like or like
Right.
have a one trick that makes them do their thing. So like Dracovish obviously has Vicious Rend. Like Comfy is obviously just like the prankster, like or not what is it, like the triage or whatever, like draining kiss stuff, priority draining kiss stuff. Like Sigilif is like obviously kind of like this kind of weird like magic bounce, like magic guard, kind of like like shift status and setup and
Sigilif was the flying type immune to rocks before it was cool.
and then like Manectric obviously was is a mon that when ground like you said like is only bad now because ground types exist and it lost hidden power. If ground types aren't in the picture, it still like was a very usable, very good mega. So yeah, definitely some that's a good way to look at it. Some very matchup dependent mons that could really
I'm kind of
polarize.
surprised that it only has two on the priority access. I'm thinking that your
I think-
formula doesn't include Thwacky.
it might not include Thwacky. That is probably true. I don't know if that Thwacky made it onto there. The Thwacky.
It's a draft. I'm excited to see what he can do with it. I think it's going to be fun to watch those games.
I agree. I think this will be like one of the most fun drafts to watch because I think every game is going to be like, wow, like this is just crazy.
Yeah, because if the opponent makes a misstep and you brought the right set, like it's over.
All right, so let's keep it going here. We got we're not even halfway through here, guys. We might need to split this up into two videos. So we got the Half City Skitty here. So this is another like draft where the speed is really low, which we've seen a couple times now. Raikou is a really good mon, and Frostass is okay, but just I feel like 115 maybe a little low for your top end speed, especially like Raikou's not the most unbeatable mon, if you know what I mean. Like it does have things that just kind of like grass types tend to do really good into it, like some bulkier ground types that can take on Scalds and do pretty well. But I really liked the Zardex pickup. He picked up some great hazard clears along the way. Sarina being a really good one. Florges is usable. So some good solid hazard clearing to help out this Mega Charizard X. Celesteal is a mon that is not what it once was in Gen 7, but I still think is quite good. So it's and then Beware is a long time favorite of mine that I was very close to drafting this season. I think it's a very good mon. So my final point before we move on is this is a draft that I think did a fantastic job, like going around and drafting a little bit of every type. I think the rock and bug type being missing are two types you're pretty okay with missing, especially when you have like, this draft still has a ton of power output with some like Mega Charizard X or Beware or Raikou. Very limited access to pivoting is the one kind of problem. Besides like Raikou and Sarina, I don't think any mons that get pivot access. Am I mistaken about that?
I think Florges gets baton pass.
Okay,
You can dry pass, but
Okay.
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, so some limited pivoting here, but that's maybe a little even less important on a draft that doesn't have a lot of like wall breaking, but rather has some sweepers, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
mons that can immediately pressure are more benefited by being able to come in quick and get out quick. The sweepers are kind of like more conditionally, like you put yourself in a position to use this Pokemon now. So I don't know, Sean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking, the speed tier obviously is a little bit of an issue, especially because there's not really any great scarfers. I mean, Raikou's not a good scarfer.
The
And
best scarfer is probably like Florges. I got or Sarina, one of those two, and those aren't great scarfers.
Yeah.
Like that's not great.
But I think it's fine just because he definitely went for like a more bulkier team, similar to me, in terms of, he's got like the Celesteal, Deoxys defense, Gastrodon.
yeah,
Florges is
very
not
bulky draft.
really good, but it's still a Pokemon that's bulky. Sarina can be somewhat bulky. Even Mega Charizard X can kind of help out with like some fire types that might have grass coverage, which otherwise are pretty annoying. But I think he definitely is leaning more heavily into the defensive variation. I think could be a problem if he runs into some setup sweepers that he might not be able to deal with so easily. But I think if you play this right, I think this could be a very good draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, okay,
It's
keep
like
going.
some of these resist totals are low, but a lot of the time, like he has like Deoxys defense with which resists a lot of types that it doesn't actually resist. Like it doesn't have to be a strict resist to resist the type. Like we were talking about earlier with like Slowbro and Earthquake. How many Pokemon are really dealing a ton of damage to Slowbro with Earthquake, week to week? It's almost like it takes damage similar to a resist. So I think with the bulk that this team has, I think he's got a very good setup here, and it'll fall on him as to how he plays to avoid letting those teams set up like maybe they can go for Sword Stance instead of Dragon Dance, for example, because they don't need the speed as much. I think that's kind of the only problem here. Again, with some fairly limited priority access. So I think that's kind of the issue with this team, but I think it's definitely play around. You're able to play around it, so I like it overall.
Dan?
It just looks like it's really hard to break through. I mean, Celesteal, any steel flying type is like the bane of my existence. So can definitely appreciate drafting a Celesteal and a Gastrodon just to be an absolute nuisance. It looks like they maybe floated 4 points. I don't know if the calc is correct, but
No, that's correct.
it seems like a lot of
They floated a
points
lot
to,
of points actually. That's a really good point
yeah.
that I hadn't even registered.
So he has a bunch of like middle, like he has 2 8s, a 9, and a 7, and then 2 15s, a 17, and an 18. Like the tiers just seem weird to me.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that this team had floated so many points. Cause like I feel like, I guess the thing is Skuntank with our rules it has to be an E tier Pokemon, but
Yeah.
otherwise could have been like could easily, for example, I think like Beware maybe or Frostlass could easily be get like a +4 and become a similar mon with just like Beware, especially like. I love Beware, but you could add 4 points to make Beware a better Pokemon, like somewhere else, without some other stronger fighting,
Right.
Yeah, those were the two I would jump on as well, trying to get Frostlass or Beware a boost.
a little weird to float that many points. I don't know.
You could, for example, if you had two free agents to change both of them, you could turn it into like Alolan Ninetales plus Pangoro, which might be a little better. But I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So pretty bulky
I
draft
gotta step
here.
away real quick. Real quick, I'm
No,
stepping
no
away.
worries. No
Sorry.
worries. I think we're gonna break this video into two parts also. This is already pretty long, part one. So it makes sense to break it down a little bit. So we're gonna get here to the Minnesota Bearticks, coached by Axel Raid. Then we're missing Daniel, but I really like this draft for what it's worth. I think this is a really, really good draft. I was looking at it. I think Mega Garchomp has been criminally slept on. As a Garchomp fan, but then I was already thought that, but now with Scale Shot, I think it does Scale Shot really well because of its immediate just power output is pretty awesome, and the Scale Shot speed is not that it's not relevant on Garchomp because it also is very much relevant there, but on a Pokemon like Mega Garchomp that lost 10 points, it kind of mitigates that downside almost entirely by going back to +1, which is pretty awesome. Tapu Koko is another really, really good Pokemon that I used last season that I really liked. And I just really love the lower tier pickups here overall. I think he just drafted a lot of really great value picks that'll really treat him very nicely. Milotic is such a good partner. Kind of to your point, Sean, earlier, it can beat a lot of grounds one-on-one pretty comfortably for Tapu Koko. And then Garchomp is afraid of Ice Beams. Milotic and Jirachi can come in on those. So just some pivot support, which is awesome even in its own right. Tapu Koko, Rachi, Milotic now gets, Flip Turn, and Moltres is another pivot. So lots of good pivots high up top. Some decent speed tiers for what it's worth. Like genuinely, I think quite good speed tiers. I think this might be one of the best drafts out there right now. I really like this one. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm definitely with you. I think this draft really covers its weaknesses very well. I think it's very hard to kind of poke holes in. Um, I think everything is just really supported very well. A lot of these lower tier mons are I think very bringable. Like I think Tauros is actually kind of slept on.
I agree. I agree.
Definitely with you on Mega Garchomp. I think with the additional Scale Shot, I wasn't huge on it before, but now I think it's just so good. Especially with the removal of hidden power as well. I think that's a big point for Mega Garchomp because regular Garchomp could sometimes run Yachi Berry if you had to, but obviously Mega can't, so it becomes a much better electric check as well, which obviously Milotic really appreciates on a draft with electric terrain. I think it's very important to have that very solid electric check. And I think even if we go by the typing chart, some of the types that he's weak to, I think he's got very good Pokemon to deal with a lot of those types, maybe Fairy type, but Jirachi is a very good Fairy answer, and Moltres is an extremely good Fairy answer. And even the Fairies that they lose to, they usually don't lose to the same one. So Moltres obviously loses to Fairies with rock coverage, but it beats Fairies that only might have fire or ground coverage, which are usually the Fairies that beat Jirachi. So I think just in general, he's got a lot of synergy between his Pokemon, and I think he's got pretty much everything you want. He's got ways to absorb hits between Milotic, Moltres can run defensive. Garchomp Mega can be EV'd very defensive and still hit hard because of its attack stat. Jirachi can be pretty defensive, and then I think he's also got
Webs.
decent top end speed tier. Yeah, webs are a thing, even though I don't think webs are very good this gen. Koko is generally fast enough in most matchups. And then I guess the one thing, he doesn't really have many good Scarfers. He basically has Jirachi that can run Scarf. And Salt kind of can run Scarf, but it's not huge.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's got great wall breakers. He's got pretty good speed. I think it's just overall a very, very good draft.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think he has. I think Delmy's is a little bit of a wall breaker also at the same time, which is pretty nice. And then, yeah, I guess the lack of Scarfers is fair. I think Sock is a better Scarfer than maybe you're giving it credit for. But I also agree with you that Tauros is super duper slept on. Sheer Force base 110 is just really a lot better than I think people realize. I agree. I think the first thing you said when you opened up your little opinion piece there, I just think this draft covers its typing weaknesses extremely well, and these any typing holes you do see are pretty quickly mitigated by another Pokemon somewhere else in the draft. So like you think like oh maybe this draft's a little fire weak, but there is a Milotic and a Garchomp right there, and like they are two of the top Pokemon in this draft, so they're going to be coming almost every week, if not every week. So
I will say the one thing is I would have liked to see maybe another rocker somewhere, because obviously Jirachi, it can definitely run rocks, especially when you're running like a defensive set. But part of the beauty of Jirachi is obviously its versatility, so you definitely don't want to be running rocks every week. Mega Garchomp is a very good rocker, I'll give it that. But
it's in the same vein as Garchomp.
the only
It's
thing other
Jirachi.
than that's the same thing as Jirachi, and I forget whose team it was earlier that we're talking about. I even though rocks aren't as good this gen, I think you still need to have a credible threat, and I think the draft might just barely reach that credible threat level of rocks in order to force mons to actually run boots.
And what's
Otherwise they can just not run them at all.
well, so like
And
that's
you
kind of
can't
like
punish
interesting,
that.
but like also in my experience in this gen, also with boots, is like rocks has become important in a different way. Instead of the chip damage, it's become informationally important a little bit. Where
Yeah,
like if I'm like you said the thing for example about Braviary is what you were talking about earlier. Like if you want to set up rocks because sometimes you can get a little bit of key information about like okay this Pokemon is Boots, so therefore I know it's not Scarf or Specs or Ban. I know I can live this hit, or it probably isn't running this or something or other. So rocks still do give you like some information now that you didn't. So I'm not saying they're as good as they used to be. Obviously, it's better to be Boots against rocks than not be Boots against rocks. But there is still a little to be gained as far as information with it. Like, okay, my opponent's not.
for sure.
That's
Definitely still an important part. I think that's why like you see like webs and like T spikes and like these other
Way
hazards
less.
are kind of they've fallen off more than rocks have.
I
Because rocks
absolutely
are
agree.
still useful.
I absolutely agree. I think that's my thoughts exactly because those also like. Yeah, just that they were already niche, well, at least more niche, and that informational advantage you could accomplish with rocks while still being the best hazard to set in general,
Right.
and the
Because,
most
like,
widespread.
If I have both, I'm gaining the same amount of information.
Like hazard stack is dead, basically. It feels like in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's do Myrtle Beach Pelipers, and I think we're gonna take a little break, and we'll get a second video out another time. But I think this is another pretty solid draft. The speed tiers aren't great. I was taking a look at this one earlier, and I thought like definitely some very impressive wall breaking threats on this draft. I think Curum's really good. Nidoking's another really powerful wall breaker, and Zapdos and Mega Mile are both really good top end. Zapdos especially has gotten a big buff this generation, and honestly in the wall breaking role, but just as a mon overall. Like I said, the speed tier gaps do worry me. Greninja I think is more than good enough for your speed tier, but then to take a gap from there to Zapdos at 100 is really not ideal. That is slightly mitigated by access to some pretty decent priority, I suppose. You have Sucker Punch from Mile, and you have like Mach Punch Girder, and Greninja has Water Shuriken and whatnot. But overall, it's a pretty big speed tier gap there. But as far as like just utility, this is a draft that has a lot of like just kind of fundamentals checked off. I think like something like Uxie does a really good job blanket checking a lot of different types of Pokemon. It's a just I think a fairly well-rounded draft. No really huge typing holes that you can see. I think just because it's a lot of pressure on Uxie though. I guess I will say as a draft that doesn't have a ton of recovery outside of its low tier mons. I guess Zapdos is
actually going to make a point about that, where I think it depends how often he wants to bring Audino, because it's just a very weird mon. But I think a lot of his Pokemon have the ability to not get one shot, but they probably get two shot. But if you're passing wishes with Audino, kind of all you need. Maybe you're taking 60%, but then Audino is healing you for maybe half that, or half your health, I should say. So you're getting back up to 90%. Now you're still looking pretty good. I think this draft is like fairly knock weak is the one thing I will say. I think obviously a lot of these top tier Pokemon don't love your Curum and Zapdos, they hate their boots being knocked off.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
not like a ton of great absorbers. I mean, Greninja resists, but it's not super bulky. Mega Mawile resists, but it's not super bulky. Um, then the other ones are kind of like low tiers. Like even Girder, it resists it, and it
But it doesn't want to lose its
generally doesn't want
knockoff.
to lose it to Violite.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a concern. Obviously, the speed is not great. Um, even though I think Greninja is one of the best cleaners there is, I think it's definitely still bypassable. Um, I mean, I have a lot of experience with Greninja because I love it and I try to draft it almost everywhere I can. I think it's a very good cleaner, but there's definitely usually each draft has like one good way to stop Greninja from cleaning their team. I don't think it's like the most reliable. Like, oh, I'm gonna bring Greninja and that'll just clean every week, and now my speed tier problems are solved. But, yeah, I really like Kyurem this gen, and I really really like Zapdos this gen. I think that's like a great duo right there. And yeah. Oh,
I think people kind of like talking about Audino though, like that's the low tier Pokemon that you don't want to have to bring every single time,
Yeah.
in general. So like
I guess the other thing is kind of like ice types. This draft doesn't love because the resists are like Greninja and Mega Mawile, and like again, both of those are really not very bulky. Especially like ice types are special with Ice Beam, and Mega Mawile, it's like decently physically bulky if you're not Mega yet with Intimidate, but its special defense is really bad. So it's really not going to want to switch into Ice Beams.
plus it's
So
one
I
of those
think you're
Pokemon that like if you ever want to click Play Rough or something, like you kind of like hang your hat on taking a hit and then hitting back.
exactly
Or like you want your health intact so you can put up a sub or two. So you
right.
really don't want to
Or
put
set up a
yourself
sword stance. Yeah,
exactly. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where like basically like sweepers should never be switch-ins. It's kind of something I found over the years. You know what I mean? Like you really
right.
want to avoid a sweeper being a switch-in because usually they need their health to do something to set up their sweep in one way or another.
Right.
And
I think this draft's definitely going to need to use like both Uxie and Audino to kind of be the ice type pivots for this draft.
sure.
So obviously, if Audino got teleport, it would be like super good. But I still think
It would.
it's generally a pretty good draft, but it definitely has its exploitable holes.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment, guys. We've already been going for well over an hour, so we're gonna take a break here. We'll do the last 10 teams in a part 2. Let me know what you guys thought down below about your draft, other people's drafts. Want to hear all about that, and we'll get the fellas back for a round 2 either later today or another day. But we'll pick this up a little bit later. See you guys later.